Hello, welcome to the programme. This is Sheffield Live TV. The programme, as regular viewers know, will then go out on my YouTube channel. Apologies, this is a bit of a one-sided show. We did look into the departure of Chris Wilder from Sheffield United and their relegation from the Premier League a few years ago. And when the Blades appoint a new manager, we'll have a special on that front as well. But very sadly, Sheffield, for the first time in its history, has suffered a double relegation this season. Sheffield Wednesdays has been a bit of a death by 1,000 cuts. We've been talking about it here for several weeks. Sadly, the reality has occurred. So what's to be done? What's caused it? What suggestions have we got to fix it? I couldn't think of two better guests than a couple of guys who've seen football close up from the inside, both as players and as managers. Indeed, both as Sheffield Wednesday managers in their time as well. Chris Turner and Brian Laws, welcome again to the programme. You've graced us with your presence many times, and there's so much to get into here. But I'd like to start with the fact that you're both passionate about Sheffield Wednesday. Brian has family connections with the Owls. Chris, you're a lifelong supporter. As for myself, well, I've been around that club far too long not to feel a lot for it, quite genuinely. So what we say here will be passionate. Go to you, Chris, first. Your feelings at this moment in time.
Obviously very, very disappointed with the outcome of the season, but obviously not surprised on how the season has unfolded. The start of the last summer when 12 points were put onto the club, it was always going to be difficult, but I always thought that it would be surmountable. And I thought that, looking back in hindsight, and hindsight's a wonderful thing, that Gary Monk, although not setting the world on fire, was gradually bringing the points difference down from 12, getting it down to 4 to 5 points, and then it rose a little bit. And then the great news was that 6 points were to be given back, basically. I thought it gave him a great chance to stay in the division. But from what I hear, Gary, that was Gary's point of view, but the chairman or the owner, his view was that playoffs were attainable and that we've got to go for them. And he didn't feel that Gary was ambitious enough and fired him on the spot. And so consequently, since then, it's all gone downhill with different managers. You couldn't have got a more experienced manager than Tony Pulis, who was given 45 days. And then I think when Tony's given the owner his view of things and what's required in January, he never saw January. And then there was a gap with Neil Thompson, who I thought did admirably in a caretaker position. And then when he lost the game at Luton by Monday morning, Darren Moore was brought in, and so on and so on. And I think with only Derby's unbelievable demise in this season, gave Sheffield Wednesday a chance right to the very end, and we couldn't even manage to get really one goal against against Nottingham Forest, or an extra goal. We scored 3. To concede 3 poor goals on the day was very disappointing. So we were close, but the playing squad has been deemed not to have been good enough and been proven, and all 4 or 5 managers have failed to get any consistency out of the playing squad that have been assembled for this season.
Well, can 4 or 5 managers succeed across the course of a season, Brian Laws?
Well, again, as Chris has just mentioned, it's so difficult for any football club to coast along and exceed expectations when you've had 4 managers in a year. It's unheard. It's not unheard of, because we've seen it with Watford, and it worked for Watford. But for Wednesday's point of view, it's been a disaster, absolute disaster from start to finish. And it's whilst Wednesday had an opportunity right to the death, in terms of the last game of the season, with the points deduction. Perhaps if they had that not occurred, they might have survived with it, but it still doesn't, paper over the cracks. It's been an awful year of football, but not only a year, it's been a few years actually, where, you can feel there's something not right there. I've watched Wednesday on many occasions, and of course I've done commentary on the games, and I was at the Derby game as well, commentating. And as Chris says, they needed a goal from there, but they could have had on many occasions look back on lots of games, looting away, 2-0 up and cruising a game, those sort of games, and then it was falling apart. And everybody who's been in charge has, in some way or another, had a little bit of positivity, but the old Wednesday seems to crop back, and they seem to fall back in that same way of performing. It's just been inconsistent. They have that little bubble, and then all of a sudden it bursts.
Something being wrong for several years, to quote you there, and I think a general feeling that so many managers can't be wrong. In the case of the two of you, Chris, you had nearly 2 years at it. Brian, you had over 3, and you're still the longest serving manager, or the longest surviving manager, since Trevor Francis back in 1995. So you've both had a bit of a run on it. The common denominator then, I mean, bluntly, we've all been critical of the players. In your opinion, guys, who is to blame? Who is most to blame for this?
Well, it's the owner.
Yeah, I agree with Chris there. I think it is. It's the owner, and it's his approach to it. And I greatly admired when he came into the football club, that for the first time I felt positive that somebody was coming in who had financial backing, who could support the team, support the club going forward. And I thought this was the greatest chance for the football club to succeed. But his lack of knowledge, and I'm going to say lack of respect for people's knowledge, because he will not listen, even when he's hearing it from the horse's mouth. And some very, very good experienced people are telling him, he still continues to not acknowledge that, in fact, just dismiss it. And that's been the problem.
Okay, well, that's bluntly put there from Brian. Now, one of the people who I believe has gone to him to try to help is Chris Turner. Am I right there, Chris?
Well, yeah, I did speak to, I think it was John Redwood. I offered my services just to sit down with the owner and him and go through things, because I'm hearing it from the man on the street. I get it every day, every week when I'm walking around where I live, regarding what's happening at the club, the prices, the commercial aspects, everything regarding the club is a disaster. And I like Brian. You can't knock the guy for his input financially into the club, but I feel sorry for him in a way that it's been wasted. Millions and millions of pounds have been wasted on bad investment in players, in managers, in the way the club operates, to totally, and Brian's 100% right regarding not respecting people, to have sponsors who are put in over a period of time a lot of money into the club, to just whitewash them away. Where, for instance, in a commercial box that were around 23, 24, 25,000 a year, to double the prices, and then say, well, if they can't afford it, we don't need their money, and a catalogue of other things regarding commercial. It's just total ill respect to the fans, and then calling them customers. It makes it even worse. I think he's backed himself into such a hole. And even the Saturday, I can take relegation as a fan. I think, it happens to clubs. It's happened to us in the past. It'll happen to other clubs again in the future. You can take that. But my major concern is this Sheffield Wednesday a going concern going forward? Can he sustain the club? Can he keep up with the payments that's required to keep the club going? Looking at the £2.5 million that we apparently have to play, which Sheffield Wednesday highlighted on Saturday, £2.5 million a season to rent the ground for 30 years. I mean, that's around £100,000 a home game to play Hillsborough. You just, that's going to affect the club at some stage. Whenever he sells the club, is he going to be the landlord for the club? We know what problems clubs have when people are landlords of grounds. The ground situation, it needs to be resolved now. The financial situation also going forward, can he sustain it? We've just re-signed the captain on a 2-year deal. I presume he's got a great contract, but we're going into League One. How can we afford it? I know the last meeting that they had, or the engagement group meeting, there's no plan. There was no plan for going into League One, because apparently League One, it's admitting defeat before it's happened. They should have been planning for League One months ago in case the eventuality does happen, and it's happened now.
Chris, I should say, is helping the Sheffield Wednesday Supporters Trust, a newly formed organisation, trying to have a dialogue with the club, trying to advocate reform at Hillsborough. Brian, don't worry about the dog. We have dogs regularly on this show. Kieran Maguire, the financial expert, his dog made a wonderful intervention on our most recent to as well. So, encourage him. I'm sure he's barking a lot of sense as well.
Yeah, she's to be fair, she's actually agreeing with Chris what he's saying. I think that's where it is. Totally agree.
There's a few dogs that have agreed with me, Brian.
I'm glad somebody agrees. But really, this situation, in my experience, is unique, because it's not one or two random people being critical of Sheffield Wednesday's owner. It's everyone. I mean, surely if he doesn't learn from this, he never will. It's every ex-player that you speak to. It's every supporter you speak to. There's a consensus. Brian, I mean, you've known football from the inside, and you've had how to gauge public opinion. But do you read it the same as me, that there is nobody apparently who's not on the same page?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, everybody's got the same opinion. So, everybody can't be wrong. That's what I see. All these managers, they all can't be wrong. Now, I'm just
except for one dog.
Except for one dog. I've just got a repairman coming around the house, and he's just letting me know that he's actually arrived. Sorry, I do apologise. No,
look, that's okay. This is the Zoom age that we live in. Sooner or later, in a few weeks' time, I'm hoping we'll be back in the Sheffield Live TV studio.
Yeah.
No dogs allowed.
Yeah, it's all right.
This is what we live with. I had a garage conversion going on when I was doing my last show, and it can be bedlam. We don't want to make light of a serious issue, but let's come on to the chairman's advisors now. I mean, Amadou Piaxu and unnamed advisors, they've got plenty of power in the background, but where's the accountability? None of them are ever available for interview. They're making major calls. Presumably the chairman is listening to those major calls. They're the movers and shakers, and yet they're in the background. I don't get it.
Well, I think Alan, when you look at the managers that we've had, Gary Monk's had great experience with Leeds, Middlesbrough prior to coming to Sheffield Wednesday. I spoke about Tony Pulis with his vast experience in the game. Steve Bruce before Gary Monk. I've known Steve a long time. He had many problems, or thought that strange events were happening around the club. Advisors. Well, that was one of the answers that came back to me. Well, the owner's got plenty of advisors advising him. They don't need any more. Well, you can turn around and say, well, what have they been advising him? But it's just when you see, it's like the contract situation. I'd like to think that Darren Moore is calling them players in yesterday, today, or even later tomorrow, because he'll know who he wants to keep and who he wants to re-sign, give a new contract to, whatever. And that's generally what happens at clubs when the last game goes. Then you put your work into operation. I would bet that Darren doesn't know what's probably going to be happening. I wouldn't be surprised. Does he have to go and have a conversation with the owner and tell him who he wants to leave? Then the owner has a conversation with somebody else who then comes back in a week or 2 weeks' time and then says, "Oh, look, we really want to keep so-and-so, and then we want, do we really want to let this player go?" And I think I know that's what's happened with previous managers with players who've been kept on for far too long. We're not a selling club. We've had players in the past to sell players to recoup money to then put back into the team, but we've hung on to them till the last minute. Adam Reach is one coming to end of his contract now. I don't think Adam's had the greatest of seasons, but he's a left-footed player who even at Derby on Saturday was putting 1 or 2 decent balls in. There'll be clubs after these sort of players, but we could have sold Adam, I'm sure, at his peak when he was scoring all them wonder goals, and then brought in a couple, 2 or 3 more quality players. That's what a manager's job is to do, and a normal manager's job. That's how it goes. But unfortunately, I don't think any of these managers have had any part in majority of the signings and obviously releasing the players, which is part and parcel of their job.
Brian, is that the sort of control that Chris is talking about there that you had in your time at Sheffield Wednesday? I talk about, it was 2006 to 2009. I say a relatively long span. Were you accustomed to that level of control?
Yeah, listen, the football club is even in my time, it still had its moments, as you well know, with people who were above me. Who were very difficult to work with. However, planning and preparation goes hand in hand with the manager's job, and he's planning months and months ahead. You've got to plan months and months ahead. And with Wednesday, as Chris mentioned earlier on, when you've actually been sanctioned with a minus 12 points, you've automatically put you into a mode of plan A and plan B. What's going to be the outcome of this, and what's going to be the downfall? What could happen? So if you've got a plan, you've got to plan well ahead. You do plan well ahead when you're doing recruitment. You're planning months in advance when you are, prior to the window opening. So you've already got 5 or 6 targets. You've already spoke to them. You all that planning is going on all the time. And, and managers do this regularly, but it seems to be at Wednesday, there is no plan. It's just a case of, it's almost making decisions off the cuff, and it's waiting for something to happen before they react. And
my column in the Sheffield Telegraph this week will say exactly that. I find it astonishing that in a season in which Sheffield Wednesday have been staring relegation in the face throughout, that they haven't got, apparently, a plan for League One. Is it more than just on the field, though? Because Hillsborough feels hollow to me, and I don't think it's just COVID. There doesn't seem to be a presence in terms of authority actually in the stadium. There's no chief executive. The place feels soulless. I know every ground will at the moment because there's no fans in it, but that's been the case for a while now. So what would you do structure-wise internally to actually correct what are absolutely obvious flaws? Chris, you first.
Well, I mean, the structure, I think soulless is the word, because the third floor, and Brian knows as much as I do, the third floor on the match day used to be absolutely buzzing. Hundreds of supporters on the third floor, eating, drinking, into the boxes to watch the match. And there was a real structure of an atmosphere. You go there now, it's empty. There's nobody there. There's nobody there. There's a couple of boxes towards the bottom end, which are scouts or 1 or 2 ex-players go. Ex-players are not really over-welcomed at the club to go and watch games. What's required, obviously, is the obvious ones as a chief executive to run the football club, to do the side, is to allow the commercial guy, who I don't even know who he is, to be honest, Alan. I might have met him on a few occasions, but that role has changed over the number of years. And the most thing is put people in these positions and let them make these footballing decisions, commercial decisions about the ground, about the kits, about everything commercially. Let them make decisions. Sit back and see what develop. And if you're not happy with it as an owner, you call people in and say, I want this, I don't want that. But don't not let them make a decision. I know people I know everybody who I know in that ground. None of them can make a decision. They have to wait and wait and wait to be told, yeah, you can do it. No, you can't do it. By that time, whatever they were trying to do, the onus of it has gone. And there's no passion in the club. Everybody walks around as though it's the end of the world. And that's before relegation. Can't imagine what they're going to be like next season in League One when we're playing the likes of Accrington Stanley and Shrewsbury. And no disrespect to them. I've seen both them teams this season at Doncaster Rovers. They're two good sides. And Accrington Stanley went to Portsmouth and won 1-0 on Saturday. There'll be no walkover games. So there's a tough period ahead. But the structure's got to be, get the proper people, get a football secretary who does the contracts and looks after these agents. The club has been for agents and players over the last 4 seasons, it must have been an unbelievable time to go and be there. Because you only have to look at the wage bill and the agents' fees and everything else. They just milked the club for the last 4 or 5 years. It's been great for them. And we need somebody back now in there sorting all this out and getting players on proper contracts. Or the players this season on 20, 30% on relegation contracts. I wouldn't be surprised if they're not. But I bet they would if they'd gone into the Premier League.
Well, that would be astonishing if that is the case. I mean, in fairness, Dupont Chansiri has issued a statement apologising for relegation. I think that's appreciated, understood. He says he takes full responsibility for it. But isn't that part of the problem, Brian, that he does take full responsibility and doesn't appear to share it?
Yeah, I mean, listen, Chris is right. Every football club and let's just say a successful football club or even an average football club has a structure of accountability. And obviously it starts from the chairman. It works from the chairman. He is the overseer of it all, and he will have obviously the final say, but he's got to allow people to do the jobs. Now, to get the best out of people, as you well know, you've got to allow people the comfort to know that they can make decisions and get on with the job and make decisions for that football club, whether it be the commercial side, whether it be a chief executive making contractual decisions, and all those people who are working under the chairman have accountability if they get it wrong. But unfortunately, Chansiri, and like I said, right from the beginning, I totally admire he's put so much money into the football club, yet I have to say he's had his pants down and everybody from every agent and player have sucked him dry. And I'm sure he's now in that mindset to say, do you know what? If I'm going to lose all this money, I might as well do it myself. And I think he's actually he doesn't allow anybody the freedom to make decisions. And whether it's the manager or the commercial side, the groundsman, whether he can cut the grass or not, it's got to come from him. Let them get on with the job that they've done for years and years and years. And they've done a fantastic job at the football club. And as Chris said, when you do walk around, the staff feel so low because they've got no structure in place. They're not enjoying their job because there's nothing to fulfill. They're just doing what they've been told to do without expressing themselves and using their experiences that they have at this football club. So I think he's just reined everything in. Unfortunately, he's reined it in so tight, and he's a man who has got zero qualifications to run a football club. And you know, it's not his fault. It's just that's how he's just gone into it and into the situation. You know, with, I suppose, with a vision of grandeur. And I don't know how he works in his own country, but he seems as though he's just brought that mentality over here, and it doesn't work with the way English football works. And so everybody is so low, I have to say. And I agree with Chris that it's not going to stop. It's just going to continue. And for all that Mr. Chansiri is actually apologising and taking full responsibility, you've got to do something about it. It's so frustrating from the outside looking in. You know, I feel like I want to shake him to say, you know, I know it's your money and I really appreciate it. And all the fans appreciate this money. And you've wasted so much of your money. And it's other people who have wasted your money. And I understand that you are wanting to make those decisions, but to allow it to work, because it is a fantastic football club. And when it's working, it's enjoyable. It's great to be in. And you can do it right. Financially, you can do it right. If you get the right people in who understand, and they won't be throwing his money away, they'll be quite good for the football club to just lower their expectations in terms of finances and keep it at the level of which it's sustainable.
And would help Dapon Chansiri as well. You know, he stands to benefit from the suggestions that you're making. I think frustration is absolutely the name of the game, and delegation is not weakness. The delegator retains the power. And I think he hasn't seen that part of it, that if he delegates to professionals inside the club, he still has power over them if it doesn't work. But he would be applauded by everybody, not least you two guys. Right, that's the end of part one, but there's plenty more to discuss. I've got lists here of out-of-contract players, in-contract players, you two as former managers. I wonder which you'd keep and which you might look to move on. Plus, James Gregg will be here to add a little bit of Sheffield United to our conversation. Do join us in a couple of minutes.